Here along with
Roy Piskadlo.
how's it going? We have been off the air for about 2 months doing
Campaign stuff.
campaign things, elections, conventions, caucus, campaigning, and everything else that comes with that. And I might add, we've been doing our special super secret election stuff, which we're not going to talk about today, but it's a big deal. And when the time is right, we will come full on with that because we're going to need all of your help in a big way. This is Truth and Consequences on KMMU, Main Street Media, Utah. Welcome. We have really missed being on the air. We've looked forward to getting back on the air. The political season is in full swing, and there's a lot of really good candidates out there that we support, and we want to have them on with us to tell us what they're all about.
Yeah, tell us what they're all about and see how our audience can help them succeed.
Yeah, so just to bring everybody up to date on what we've been doing, Roy, what has filled your days since we've been off the air?
Well, we've been working with Mike Lindell's group and going through voter rolls and voter roll history in 7 big counties. We'll come back with where we are with that probably pretty soon. You have been gathering and talking to a lot of different volunteers because ultimately we're going to have to go out and knock on doors and see and actually talk to people at specific addresses. And it's been a lot of work. And our producer, Dwayne, has been teaching me how to use SQL database management because the data is monstrous. So it's been a big data project. But we're making progress, and the Mike Lindell's guys have been enormously helpful. Very, very helpful.
Yeah, it was great to finally get all the data. That's been the holdup, but we now have the data that we need to start combing through. And we have several dozen researchers that are beginning to comb through the material to find certain anomalies, let's say at this time, that do not sync up with what we're being told. And we have plans to bring that information forward when the time is right. And as Roy said, that we could certainly use a lot of help as we move through this process. But right now, we are focusing on getting through this primary election season. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun getting to know people in the process. And I know that you've been there right along with me as I've been courting delegates and having numerous, I bet I had 25 plus town hall meetings for delegates, and then culminating in the convention process, the county, in our case, the county convention in April. And we have been getting all of our ducks in a row since then and trying to now begin to go.
Well, you are running for Senate District 15, and you have a primary.
Yes.
And you actually made it through the caucus convention process, county convention process.
I did.
You and a gentleman by the name of Scott Cuthbertson both advanced, and Amber Scheel, who I think is currently on the school board right now.
She is the president of the Canyon School Board, actually.
The Canyon School Board. And she did not make it through that process, but she gathered signatures.
That's right.
And in case people don't remember, if there's 2 ways to get into a primary, and I personally don't have a primary, so I don't have a Republican challenger. I'm going straight against the Democrat.
And just as a reminder, Roy is running for House District 41, which has been held by a Democrat for 34 straight years now. So he needs a lot of help.
And we're going to win it. So
yeah, that's the idea.
That's the idea. But so you can make it onto the primary ballot, which is the primary is going to be on June 25th. And there are 2 ways to get on that ballot. One is to go through the caucus system and the convention system, either state or county, And then the second way is to gather signatures. Depending on which office you're going for, you can gather more or less signatures.
Right.
And what was interesting about this particular convention, there were a number of big races, including the race for this gentleman, Mike Carey, which we will be bringing on as our guest in a second here, where people did not gather signatures because that is expensive, time consuming, and in particular, it really kind of circumvents the actual delegate process. And to me, the way you did it and the way Mike did it and the way Phil Lyman did it, who's running for governor, and Frank Mylar, who's running for state attorney general, Trent Staggs. There's a number of very prominent candidates that went just right in through the convention and caucus process, went and interacted with delegates and got in the old-fashioned way rather than buying their way onto the ballot.
And it truly is buying, Roy. For example, a state Senate race requires 2,000 signatures. And although Cuthbertson did get through at convention, he also attempted to gather signatures.
Right.
And he spent $24,000 to gather signatures. I believe Amber Shield was at about 16,000 versus a big fat zero for me.
Yeah.
They outspent me approximately 30 to 1 leading up to convention. I'd say that's not being fiscally responsible at all. I think that this is the signature route as a way to, as you said, circumnavigate or circumvent the system altogether. And
the delegate system and
the delegate and convention system. And it's a way that essentially eliminates people without money, because who has $25,000 to spend on signature gathering just for a Senate seat, a state Senate seat?
I know I don't.
So that right there makes it more of an elitist, wealthy person game. And that's exactly what it is. They throw a lot of money at it and they automatically get on the primary ballot. And it's just not right. We need to do away with SB 54 that was put in place when Bob Bennett lost to Mike Lee by Senator Bramble and others that are currently up at the Utah State Legislature. It's a way for incumbents to stay in and not have to interact with the delegates.
Exactly. I mean, both of us, to the extent that we're successful and actually make it in and win our elections in November, our plan is to go right at SB 54 and remove it.
Absolutely.
Because it favors incumbents by far.
And the rich. It favors incumbents and the rich. And I think our guest, Mike Carey, by the way, as you mentioned, did not gather signatures, but I believe his opponent, Rochelle Morris, did. And I think Michael probably talked to this, but roughly, I think Mike spent somewhere between $5,000 to $7,000 or $8,000, and she spent $103,000 just to get up to convention. And that includes gathering signatures, elaborate dinners and lunches and expenses to consultants and so on. That is really unnecessary. It's a misuse of donors' funds. I know if I was...
actually, it reflects either she personally has an enormous amount of money in which she could spend. I mean, because Mike will tell us, but the pay associated with a county commissioner, I've been told that it is a part-time job because although it's a lot of work, an enormous number of hours, but it pays as a part-time job. And to pay $100,000 to get a job that is kind of part-time, it seems like a bad risk return. It suggests that there's some other motivation there, economic motivation.
You don't think it's altruistic that she wants to spend that kind of money and get in and actually help other people and not herself?
Why no? I don't.
Just saying it like it is.
Just saying it like it is.
Just saying.
So anyway, we'll be talking to Mike, and he'll take us through his whole experience. And hopefully we can do this with some other candidates leading up to the primary to get people in tough races. In addition to Steve, because Steve's got a tough race. Maybe at the end of this, if we have time, we could talk about Steve's race and explain where he is relative to the other folks, Cusperson and Scott Cusperson and Amber Shield. So with that, shall we bring in, is Mike ready to go?
I think he probably is.
Yeah, he's always ready. So why don't we bring him in?
Okay, Mike, we're going to kick you in here. What the heck just happened?
You just clicked on that thing down there.
I know. There he is. Mike Carey, everyone. He is running for the at-large Salt Lake County Council seat. Hi, Mike.
Good to see you.
Hey, Mike.
You guys have been busy like me.
Yeah. No, I'm not been as busy as either one of you, only because I don't have a primary, so I'm lucky. But Mike, why don't you explain first what the county commissioner at large seat means? For one, what their responsibilities would be, and then why don't you go into your background and experience and how that jives with actually the responsibilities of that seat? Sure
thing. Well, first of all, thank you both for having me on. I understand how busy you are, even though you don't have a primary opponent there, Roy. But the work you guys are doing on the election integrity is awesome. So thank you for showing leadership in that. And Steve, I know you've been out pounding the pavement. I've seen a ton of your signs everywhere, so that's a good sign. No pun intended.
Yeah, he's lost a lot of weight walking around putting up signs.
Yeah, I blanketed the entire west side of I-15 south of Route 80 over 2 days with large signs. So I saw plenty of yours in your Senate district, though. So that's good. So the county council is about 20 years old. It used to be a 3-person commission. Now it's a 9-person council, and it's composed of 6 district council members and 3 at-large council members. The district council members are 4-year terms, and the at-large are 6-year terms. And the at-large race, each one of those seats is up for re-election every 2 years. They stagger them. And so Jim Bradley, who was previously on the commission prior to the county government changing, I think it was around 2002.
Mike, I think he was on there when I was a baby, and I'm 60 years old.
He was on the commission for a long time. It was a 3-person commission. And then in 2002, when the county voted to, I guess there must have been a ballot initiative or a referendum, some kind of, it was a ballot initiative, I'm assuming. It was before I moved here, to go to this 9-person council, because Salt Lake County is clearly the largest county in the state with 38% of the state's population, 1.2 million people.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike. Isn't one of the distinctions that a commission actually does not have a mayor generally, and a council has a mayor? Is that one of the distinctions?
I'm not sure. They may have had like a manager or a county executive. Back east where I'm from originally, that you oftentimes had at least someone in the executive side, and the commission was kind of acting as the legislative body. But that predates my arrival in Utah by 10 years. So when they kind of voted out that, or replaced that form of government to what we have now. But Jim Bradley's been in that seat for a long time. Okay. And by most accounts, Jim's actually a pretty moderate guy compared to where the Democrats have gone recently. So he's like an old school Democrat. But he's retiring. He's not running. So it's an open seat. And so that's how it works. The primary responsibility, it is, well, first of all, it's a part-time job, like you guys were saying before the lead in. It's a part-time job. I think it pays roughly $50,000 a year, something like that. So it's not small money. That's real money. But for the part-time effort, and you wind up putting in a lot more than part-time into it, obviously. But the obligation is part-time, but you do a lot of work outside of the working hours, obviously, with your team. And so I decided, and the at-large race obviously covers the entire map, the full boundary of Salt Lake County. So you're covering everything from, the southernmost tip of Bluffdale down by Redwood Road and Camp Williams, all the way up into Immigration Canyon, the entire all of Salt Lake City, and out almost to the to the peak of the Wasatch, to the peak of the Ochre Mountains. So and everything in between those boundaries. So it's a huge map, and you're representing 1.2 million people. So effectively, it's the third largest race in the state after the state races, which governor, auditor, treasurer, AG, and U.S. Senate. But it's bigger than all of the each of the federal congressional races, CDs 1 through 4. So, and it's tied with the Salt Lake County mayor's race. But the county government is this layer that sits between the state and the cities, right? And so when the county government was set up, there was a very large portion of the county was unincorporated. So it was not included in areas of the cities. So the county, it was the county's purview. The county has some, county's purview is legislated by the state legislature for certain things like, the sheriff's department, the jail, the Department of Health, for example. And then they pick up through what's called the Municipal Services District, all the other public services that are carried by cities and towns normally, like waste hauling and road maintenance and so
if an area is unincorporated, that means that it is not part of a municipality, and therefore
correct.
an unincorporated area would kind of flow up to the county council.
Yes, yeah, the county kind of picks up where those don't, and where those don't exist. And there are some cities in the county that, because the county still provides those services, they outsource those services to the county through the MSD. So like permitting services is another one that is oftentimes the cities will rely on the county MSD to do the plan review and zoning, plan review and building, for construction permits, for example. Right. So you've got these three layers of government. You have state, county, and then the cities. And so a couple things have changed. I moved here. Well, let me give you a little background. So I'm 49. I was born and raised in New Jersey. New
Jersey. Wow.
Yeah, man. We have great skiing, let me tell you. I think the slope of my street is bigger than the biggest mountain in New Jersey that I learned how to ski on. The ice I learned how to ski on. But grew up in northern New Jersey, about 45 minutes west of Manhattan. It's called the tri-state area, right? So it's basically North Jersey, all of Manhattan and Long Island, Westchester County, what the city folk call upstate, but it's really only about 50 miles north of New York City, and New York itself is a pretty big state, and Connecticut. So I grew up in the tri-state area, single mom, only child. She had me real young, and we didn't grow up with. I didn't grow up with a lot. My mom was a travel agent, if you remember what those are.
Yep.
Pre-internet, pre-Expedia, and all those websites now. But I graduated high school in '93, and went to Alfred University in Western New York, which is a small private school, private liberal arts and engineering and art school. I got a mechanical engineering degree. I paid my what student loans, and the school is actually very generous with its money. So I got a huge trustee grant, which was need based and academic based, but academic and need based. I had Stafford loans, Perkins loans, Pell grants, you name it, work study, federal work study. And so I had
and nobody forgave those loans.
No, I did by paying them off.
Yeah.
So by the time, and I was never like into being a student, so I kind of figured out how to be a student in college, like a lot of people do. And Calc 2 will eat your lunch if you don't pay attention. So I, paying my way through school, working full time, basically between work study and working at a bar in town where I bounced, and that paid the bills. And so whatever shortfall I had, I would earn during the summers doing construction. So I worked for a small civil contractor doing, gas main installations and gas services in Western New Jersey. It was a friend of a friend, family, 16 years old. New Jersey's way more humid. It's just as hot as Utah, but way more humid and a lot more bugs. So that was not fun. And that's one way to motivate you to want to get a degree, is to sweat through 8 shirts a day while digging trenches. But that's how I got through Alfred. I wound up graduating with just under 50 grand in student loan debt. I graduated in December of 99. I was gone from school for a couple semesters. I met my wife, Jen, during one of those breaks from school when I was home working to save up to go back. And, I graduated in the fall of 99. We got married 4 months later. And we had moved to Southern Maryland, where I had my first taste of the DoD industry. And it was a great job. I was designing custom Humvees for Special Forces, US SOCOM's Psychological Operations Command. No weapons, just all psyops, which was pretty cool. But we were down in Southern Maryland. We were newlyweds, and we were, unless you had a boat and waterfront property, there was not much going on there. And so by happenstance, a bunch of my buddies from college landed in the DC area, and both on Capitol Hill and in Bethesda. And so we were spending our weekends up there. So I did what any former rugby player does, or any rugby player does. You send your resume to the rugby clubs to try to find a job. So got a hit, wound up going up to DC, got a job with a company that was a consulting firm for the construction industry, that did project scheduling and claims. So if a job goes south or gets sideways, they handle the dispute and oftentimes serve as the expert witness. So I went up there. We bought a place in Silver Spring, Maryland, and bought our starter home, 3-bedroom Cape Cod, and had a blast. And 2003 we started a family. I got 3 kids now, all born in DC, or in Silver Spring, and they're 21 or almost 21. Ryan will be 21 in a week and a half. My daughter Vanessa is a freshman at Ole Miss, and she's 19. And what's that?
Go Rebels!
Hotty toddy. And I still don't know what that means, by the way. I don't think anyone in Mississippi knows what it means either. Yeah. And then we got a 14-year-old son. So boy, girl, boy, all great kids, figuring life out in this complicated modern era. But, I went after about 2 years of doing that, learning how to become an expert scheduler and seeing a whole bunch of different projects. I really kind of, really fell in love with this one project called the NIH Clinical Research Center. And, the team out there was awesome. I'd helped them get their schedule on board. And one day, about 3 months after I finished my assignment there and got them all, plumbed up with their schedule, I stopped in and I said, hey guys, how you doing? You want to hire me? And sure enough, 3 weeks later, I started work as a entry position, project engineer for a general contractor. And from November of 2002 to, it only took a couple of years, but 2008, I was running a third of the new Walter Reed project for both design and construction. And that was a new $1 billion design build hospital in Bethesda, right across the street from my old NIH job. Managed a big team out there, managed about $300 million worth of the project value. And then towards the end of that, we had our third kid, and it's like, we can't upsize our house because it's a Cape Cod, and it would cost a fortune. And we're in the recession, and the recession, DC was recession proof because of the government. Everybody made money after 9/11 in that town. Okay. We saw the growth of the federal government just explode after that. And not so much in government employees, but in federal contracting, both in the intelligence community and the DoD. And so, and it got to a point too, after Obama got elected, where you couldn't do anything without people talking politics. And like most people, even though I didn't vote for him, I wanted him to be successful. Okay. But you couldn't go to a kid's birthday party. You couldn't go to a, like the it's called soccer, but it's all, we called it huddle ball, where they just kind of like huddle around the ball.
Yeah.
Huddle. And so we could see that there's this alternate universe where, the financial realities of a really bad recession didn't matter to these folks. And it kind of got gross. Like, we wanted to leave. We just didn't want to be there anymore. We have some great friends that we love dearly that are still there, but we didn't grow up there, and it kind of run its course. So I threw my name in the ring for a bunch of jobs around the country, and the U.S. Embassy in London. My company, Balfour Beatty, was chasing all these big mega projects, minimum $500 million or more. And one of those boxes was Utah, and I had checked the box, but I didn't know what it was. And then the big boss called me in and said, "Hey, I know you want to go to Texas to build the Fort Hood Hospital with your team from Walter Reed, but I really want you to go to Utah because it's a gnarly contract with the Army Corps of Engineers. It's a fast-paced job. It's a $1.3 billion project, big data center, the NSA's data center down in Bluffdale, and which is probably recording this conversation in real time. I really need you out there." And so we jumped on a plane, came out, found our house, and after a couple of days in Cottonwood Heights, and we've been here ever since. And we moved out here in February of 2012, February of 2011. So I started commuting out here in October after my part of Walter Reed was complete. And I was running $850 million of that $1.3 billion project. I had a team of about 36 people that reported directly to me, and I did a whole bunch of other stuff for the entire project team. And, and so managing big teams and managing big budgets is relevant. Okay. That's why I share that with you. So then, but 6 months after we got here, we're like,
so on a team like that, when you're doing something like this data center or Walter Reed project, how many people would you have, under your direction?
So of my employees, it was a joint venture with two other firms, but the people, and it was a blended team. So of that blended team of that 3-part joint venture, I had 36 on my team, and managing the design and construction of the data centers themselves. And but the total project team, this is your site team, was like 136. Mm-hmm. I had 2 people above me, an executive and a senior VP. But the job, it was basically a 28-month job, and we're doing $1.3 billion of construction in 28 months. We had some months where we billed almost $100 million. That's a tremendous amount of work in place. And that's when we had about 2,500 people on day shift. And I think at peak, we were reaching 4,000 total per day between the 2,500 on the day shift and the other 1,500 at night.
So that's at the data center at Bluffdale?
Yeah. So about 70% of the way through is when the whole Edward Snowden story broke. And people were pretty disappointed because we had been sold that there was a very patriotic reason that this is being built for our national security and national infrastructure, if you will. I'll leave it at that. But we found out, we all know now that that things like the Patriot Act and FISA are they're just scraping data from everywhere they can, and who knows what they're doing with it. But in the wrong hands, we all know now that it can be used. It could be used for less than noble reasons. So at the completion of that project, I moved into a national role, and my family was skiing. That's where you and I first met, Roy, with Ryan on the ski team and your girls up at Snowbird. And then
so you weren't when you said you went way back. You really do.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
U4, I think it was like the U14s or U12s when Ryan started. So
we used to barbecue at the bottom of the race hill.
Yeah.
Mike would be flipping burgers, and I would be taking the garbage out.
I believe that. I've
you
seen
might
it.
remember when I wore the Nacho Libre costume and did the slalom course. Those pictures are not for public
Not
consumption.
flattering.
Neither was my skiing.
I don't want to see those. By the way.
I'll send you a Christmas cards, Steve. But I moved into this national role. I became a road warrior. I was on the road for almost 4 years. It's funny. I was making diamond status in March. I know you know what that's like, Roy, with some of the travel you do for work. But I was bouncing all over the country, chasing big jobs, mostly in healthcare. We landed a whale at Penn Medicine, where we built this $1.6 billion downtown urban hospital. It's a beautiful building. I was part of the pursuit team, basically one of the leads for my company. It was kind of like a combined team that went after it with the architects and the engineer and a joint venture partner on the contracting side. And then I wound up, basically being the project executive for the first 15, 16 months of construction, through design, as we got into construction. So all the planning, all the design, all the programming, obviously the architects do the design, but we're helping them steer the design towards budget. What can we afford, so we're not going over?
And something that won't fall down.
Yeah, something that won't fall down, and something it's 100-year building, literally. The technology in it was designed in a way that you could never buy it from a simple, what we call plans and specs job, where an architect just goes and designs it, and then you go out and hard bid it. We innovated so many new creative solutions on that by having all the right people in the room and bringing in the smart, the best in the business when it comes to technology, infrastructure for healthcare. It was incredible. There's still things out there that haven't even bled out into the rest of the marketplace yet. And that job's been complete now for a couple of years. So, but then I, the travel started to get on me, and, it was having an effect at home, especially, with Jen playing zone defense, 1-on-3, with 3 kids going to 3 different schools at one point. And then, so I had to make a change. So I went to work for Layton Construction for about a year and a half, worked in their healthcare group right there on 90th South and Sandy. Did business development for them. I helped get them into the data center world that they're killing it in now. And then I almost went to work for Facebook. Best job I never got. That would have required me to move to the Bay Area. Best job I never got. Did I say
Yes.
that? Right before COVID, mind you. And then I went to work for Big D, who had been my JV partner on the data center in Bluffdale. Built some multifamily apartments, all those great buildings we see all over the, Salt Lake City now.
You would know Corey more then.
Oh, I know Corey's a friend. Corey's a great
friend
guy.
of mine as well.
And Rob, his dad, is, he is Mr. Utah. Rob was our biggest fan and cheerleader down at the Bluffdale data center when we were building that, back in 2011. Great people. And so I worked there for a while, did some multifamily, a whole bunch of projects. I had a bunch of teams reporting for me. And then I downsized, went to a company that did biotech. During COVID, I went over to a small company that did biotech design build. It was smaller, it was better financial opportunity for me, kind of had more skin in the game. And then, but then along the way, I started developing a software application that's going to launch later this year on the side. And I brought a friend of mine in. That same friend is the one who got my resume 25 years ago. And that's how I work for the company Aegis Project Controls now. So Aegis was the scheduling firm that I hired on all those big jobs after they were founded. So the CEO is a good dear friend of mine, former teammate of mine, literally have bled together on a rugby field, and it was a good fit. And then I wanted to move over to the consulting world because I could touch more projects and help more owners set their jobs up for success. So I run their owners CM group for Aegis, and we're kind of in startup mode. I'm mostly helping people around the country in established offices get it off the ground, and we're slowly starting up a Utah office here that'll cover the Mountain States region for all the service lines. But with that change, okay, that's my full resume. Sorry to go on forever, but it's a lot of this is relevant.
That's all relevant
to the county council race, because You know, I didn't really start paying attention to politics. I mean, I paid attention to national politics like a lot of people do, especially in the big election years. But I've always voted conservative, Republican. And, you know, in 2020, I kind of woke up scratching my head the day after the election. I'm like, man, I thought this was in the bag, you know, and then I started paying closer attention. And then in 2020, in the lead up to the 2022 race, in 2022, March, I went to my first caucus with my wife because I wanted to see the process. I hadn't, you know, with kids, you're like, you're in a fog for years when they're younger. But we finally got some breathing room and went to the 2022 caucus. And my wife was like, she's a Democrat, he's a Democrat, she's a Democrat. All these Democrats were walking into our caucus meeting, and they had we know now that there was roughly 100,000 Democrats that switched party affiliation to try to steer the 2022 primary vote or convention vote away from Mike Lee towards Becky Edwards and Allie Isom, or Allie Isom, one or the other. I mean, I don't know what the motivation was there to have two of them.
Is that number that you cite a statewide number?
I saw that as a state. Yeah, that was a statewide thing. So I was I got elected state delegate and precinct chair at that meeting. And that's when I started to, you know, so I went to state convention. That was the first time. You know, Mike Lee won that handily. But, you know, with everything that's been going on since 2020, with, you know, the outfall from COVID, you know, the just the gross amount of spending and debt we've been taking on, and the record inflation due to this disastrous, you know, Bidenomics that some people like to cheer for some reason. You know, you know, I decided to really pay attention to the local side of things because there was a lot of stuff happening here that I didn't like either. And didn't, you know, I kind of wondered, am I back in Maryland, you know, like blue Maryland? You know, the first thing was the mask policy where the county council punted on that and did not overrule the director of the health department at the county level, you know, and that's despite the fact that like pretty much everyone was done. Okay. You know, I think that was in the fall of 21, even that we were having that debate. I mean, come on. And so, you know, my kids they're about 90% of where they were before all that nonsense. And, you know, back to where they should be in their development, when it comes to academics. And, but that was the first thing. And then, last June, when I knew I was going to make this change to the consulting world, I started to look at, you know, where can I jump in maybe and serve? Again, I'm not running to get elected. I'm running to serve. Okay. And I looked at the at-large race as a good option. And one, it's part-time. Two, it's long, 6 years. Okay. And I thought that I could have a lot of impact in improving, you know, some of the things and bringing some efficiency as well. Our budget's grown to close to $2 billion. And I know that not all of that is county directed. Some of that is, you know, from the state putting money into the county coffers for them to pay the bills, basically, you know, like with transportation, for example. But still, you know, we spend a lot of money on stuff that the county really shouldn't be in the business of. And then on top of that, we've got we have far fewer areas of the county now that are unincorporated. And in 2027, the last of those areas, those 11,000 residents that receive their services exclusively from Salt Lake County, will be absorbed into, or they will either form their own little cities and towns, or they're going to be incorporated into adjacent cities. So in all that time, as all these unincorporated areas have been picked up by the various towns around and cities around the county, and we have wall-to-wall cities, the budget has continued to grow. We have 4,500 employees. What are we doing? That makes no sense to me. So, you know, I've spent a lot of time looking at the budget. There's a lot of detail that I still need to get in, frankly, you know, once I'm elected, but, you know, I think there's a huge opportunity to get us focused on lean and mean, efficient government and get us out of the business of some of the things that we shouldn't be funding, because cost of living has gone through the roof, you know, and that each one of us pays for that. People with far fewer means than you guys or me, you know, are really feeling it. And so, you know, that's so I
was going to ask you, I mean, given that's what early in the conversation, we were talking about unincorporated areas, and that would flow up to the county government legislative body, really. But with them being all absorbed, I mean, what is really left for the county council, the county government to actually do?
So there are the legislature, the state legislature is what tells the counties they're responsible for. Okay. And we've grown far beyond that scope as a county. Okay. Now, some of the things, the ZAP tax and what that funds, I'm okay with the zoo and the arts, but there's a lot of money.
That tax basically pays for like Hogle Zoo and arts.
Yeah.
And parks.
And
Yeah.
parks.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so, I mean, they're not essential, but they provide value. Okay.
Yep.
Now
so
let me ask a question about that.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. Is that on an automatic increase every year, or does it have to be voted on to increase that tax?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm pretty sure it's voted on, though. I don't think we have any automatic. If we do have automatic, I'm not sure where that applies. But we've got a couple things that I've heard plenty of stories of this use it or lose it mindset. Okay. Yep. Where there's surplus money to spend in the budget. And if we don't spend it at the end of the year and rush to spend it at the end of the year, it's going to be, you won't be able to get it funded next year. I've also learned that we've been carrying for sometimes multiple years open positions, okay, that continue to go unfilled in the mayor's operation, in the mayor's office, basically anybody in county operations. So if the service is being provided and it's being provided well, why are we continuing to say we need more people to do the job? Right. So it's bureaucracy at its finest, in my opinion. But
God forbid we give any of that money back to the citizens.
Yeah. And I mean, on a per capita basis, it's not going to be, a ton of money, but I think we need to get out of this mindset of, here's my beef with government spending in general. There's no incentive to operate it like a private business where you're responsible for P&L, profit and loss. Okay.
Because you're not.
Because there's no consequences, right? So I guess there's a consequence. You might not get reelected. So, I think there's a lot of opportunity in the budget to really look at every single service we provide. Also evaluate how we're measuring success in the delivery of those services. We call those KPIs in the private sector, key performance indicators. I mean, just in the half dozen to a dozen folks I've talked to, like, there's not a lot of KPIs in any of the services we provide. It's just go do the service. And if you need more money, we'll get more money next year. So that we can't do that. Okay. We shouldn't be doing that. That's just not fiduciarily responsible. So the budget's a big part of it, but that's not why I got in the race. All right. Let me tell you guys why I got in the race. I mean, back in June, when I was thinking about doing this, there were different people kind of rumored to be running in different spots. And one of them was actually someone I was happy to support in the at-large race. And that person switched to a district race right in early January. And then when I saw, my primary opponent as the only option, I did 20 minutes of recon, and I found out that, despite having only lived here, since 2018, which is fine. I mean, people can move here and run for office if they want, but she was completely on the Becky Edwards bandwagon for Becky's 2022 Senate run, and a major donor to both campaigns, the 2022 Senate campaign, as well as the 23 special election that Celeste Malloy eventually won. So she's tied. My opponent is tied to that network of people. She was asked to run by Carey Lisenby, who doesn't even live in Salt Lake County. And when I just said, screw it, frankly. I'm going to go down. And I told my wife what's going on, and she knew I was thinking about this. I went down and filed the next day. I didn't have any photo op. I just went in, filled out the paperwork, and I said, here we go. And the reason I got into this race was to give people, the people of Salt Lake County, an option in the primary to understand that we don't have to keep settling for, super moderate, possibly even liberal Republicans. Okay. I mean, Becky Edwards' record has repeatedly been noted as the most liberal conservative or Republican to vote when she was in the House. And so, and the twice failed candidacies she's had, where she outspent her opponent.
It's interesting.
She outspent her opponents like 2-1, 3-1, and still lost. So this whole notion that like, hey, collect all this big money donors in a primary, and that's the person who can win the general. You can't. She hasn't even gotten past the primary. So I'm running on like grassroots issues, like, and we talked about budget. That's one of them. Go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
Well, it's to say it's interesting we have that Becky Edwards connection in common.
Yeah.
My opponent, Scott Cuthbertson, is backed and endorsed by the Becky Edwards PAC that she started.
Yeah, the governing group. Yeah.
Yeah. So it says a lot about who the candidate is when you see who's funding their candidacy.
And if you look at the governing group and you see, Governor Herbert's on that board, there's a couple other people. I mean, and frankly, I don't know these people personally, but it's those policies that kind of created the financial situation we have right now in Salt Lake County, where it's unaffordable to live here. Okay. And this is, so I jumped in to be a conservative voice that is not connected to any of the legacy political infrastructure, if you will, of the Salt Lake City based Republican Party. I'm for small government, low taxes. Like, government should be doing the bare minimum in terms of providing services, especially at the county level, where we're kind of in this phantom zone between the state does a ton of stuff and the cities are going to do most of all the work. What is the county there to provide? It should be really focused around those services. And we've gone off, exploring, into all these other spaces that were never part of their purview, so, we talked about the budget, and the budget is interesting because I think there's a lot of opportunity there for efficiency. Mayor Wilson's, I think I could do a very good job. My background between managing $1 billion plus budgets, as well as I'm also a trustee at my alma mater, Alfred University, where we use fund accounting. And so you have restricted funds for all these things. I plan on unpacking every single line item on one of those things, talking to the department heads with the mayor's office in the room, and say, how are we measuring performance? Okay, we have this machine that's built that was built initially for roughly 40% of the landmass of the county being an unincorporated space, and where the county would provide those services. That 40% is going to be at zero in 2 years. Why do we still need this operation?
Well, we all know that bureaucracies are really designed to perpetuate themselves. So they create a problem and then they go and try and solve it.
It's like cancer. It just keeps festering and growing and spreading.
Yeah. I mean, I saw that in DC with the federal government. Okay. It grows to eventually sustain itself. I mean, there's a reason why, DC itself is like 11-1 Democrat to Republican. Okay. Because without a robust government, they would be unemployed. Some of them, I would argue, would be unemployable. All right. And there's a big difference. So, I'm not suggesting that's a problem we have at the county. It's just, it's kind of this, it's just this giant ball of chewing gum that's just gotten bigger and bigger.
It's becoming more and more like DC.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, so is the state, Mike.
Well, look at the state budget.
At the state level.
Well, I think it was I forget, was it the Utah Tax Authority or whatever, I forget who it is, recently stated, I'll find the link and send it to you guys later. You can probably riff on this another time, but basically they've said like, you're at a point now where you've given away so many it's tax-free goodies between the Fair Park and, which is the baseball stadium, the downtown district with the hockey arena, the point of the mountain, the point, the old prison site.
Yeah, the
and
smart city.
and all these EDTIFs to companies that move here and get a tax benefit for growing their employment base. You've reached a point where you've kind of saturated your ability to give out more goodies, and if you do so, you're gonna have to raise taxes. And that's just like 2 weeks ago. I'll find the link and send it to you guys when we're done. And so it's an interesting read to have someone in Utah actually saying the same thing that, I was kind of thinking going into this race. A lot of those EDTIFs, over the last 10 years have gone to tech companies that moved here from more expensive, predominantly blue states that brought thousands of employees with them. All right. And I think that's a big part of why our housing has gotten so out of control. A starter home it should not be $500,000. Okay.
No, it shouldn't. Let's talk about that, Mike.
Yeah.
Really quick, we'll just take a quick break and identify ourselves to all our listeners. You are listening rather to KMMU, Main Street Media, Utah. We are live on YouTube, X, formerly known as Twitter. At what point are they going to stop saying that?
You can start now.
I can start now on X, forget the Twitter part, and Rumble. Or you can find us on your favorite platform. Search KMMU.org. And we are with Mike Carey. He is the at-large candidate for Salt Lake County Councilman. Very interesting conversation. Mike has a very interesting and storied background. Not storied, but you've done a lot of big projects. I would say as big as the budget is in the county. You said that's at about $2 billion a year, roughly.
Yeah, my total list of portfolio projects is just under $7 billion. All right, and there's a key difference there, okay, between me and my primary opponent. My primary opponent comes from wealth management, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and she's very successful. I'm not taking anything away with her. I actually like her a lot. She's a very sweet woman, and we're very cordial. There's no ill will there. Okay, but there's a big difference between looking at balance sheets and recommending, investments than there is actually being responsible for the budget and delivering on all the goods associated with that budget, schedule, quality, safety. Construction is one of the most dangerous industries in the world, and kills hundreds of people, thousands of people every year. It's a dangerous business. And so, I'm also responsible for pretty much every single employee that works for me, everyone they supervise, their families, their welfare. And we don't make huge margins in the construction industry. It's nothing like any other business out there. It's like construction and restaurants compete for like the lowest possible margin on an annual basis. All right. So you have to do a ton of volume, all right, to make good money in that industry. And so, you're relying on people, you're relying on their smarts, their intellect, their ability to problem solve. You're teaching them, you're coaching them, you're mentoring them, you're showing them when pressure might be too much. You're also telling them when, hey, you need to step it up a little bit, and so, I think I think that might offer a fresh perspective to how the county government might adopt a mindset of a higher degree of accountability than they currently have. And again, I have nothing bad to say about our county employees. I mean, respect all public service, public sector employees. It's just, when bureaucracy, bureaucracy.
I know.
Well, listen, it's not the front. It's usually not the frontline workers. It's usually the managerial class that grows and grows and grows, and then it's you kind of get this when anything goes sideways. So I think we could take a fresh look at how we first of all what services are specifically required, and then how we deliver those services and how we measure success. And if we're not hitting those metrics, those KPIs, we've got to take a different crack at it. We got to take a different approach. We can't just keep throwing tax dollars at the problem. And that's frankly how government always solves these problems. So,
Mike, is there any specific items that you think the county is currently undertaking that they shouldn't be? Can you be specific about anything like that?
There's a lot of programs that are funded by smaller programs, but it's death by a thousand cuts that are funded by the general fund that could go away. That the county has no business being in. We fund a lot of little nonprofits. Okay. And, sorry to say this, but not all nonprofits are really noble in their cause. They may have a good idea. All right. But anytime you're paying overhead into an organization and, a 25 to 30 cents on the dollar is actually getting to the end purpose because you have to pay those folks,
Right.
that I'm not saying it's a scam. There are some scams out there that operate like that. There's plenty of them in DC.
Well, like Black Lives Matter was a good example of that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
A nonprofit where the owners.
I thought BLM stood for build larger mansions.
Yeah. So that's just a good example of how that cannot work well.
Yeah. And so I'm not saying the county funds those. I'm not suggesting that, but it's just, we've got to, I don't know where we got into this business of thinking that we can solve all ills. Okay. A conservative approach would be, let's identify the problem. And if we have to create enabling legislation to allow free market principles to solve the problem, someone's going to go after it. Okay. Someone's going to go after solving that problem. Mental health. I mean, I am a huge supporter of mental health, but I'm not a supporter of just throwing money at the problem. We've got to change the way we, operate. I mean, if you look at the homeless population, for example, in Salt Lake City, I worked down there for 4 years during COVID. You can't tell me that now, that 70 to 80% of them don't have some sort of alcohol or other drugs.
It's clear. In fact, I'll interject with a little story. It literally happened to me over the weekend. I was out putting signs out on 7200 South for my campaign. And I had a homeless man across the street, started yelling at me. And he got this fiery look in his eye and he started running at me, like screaming, "Why are you following me? Why are you following me? What are you doing? Why are you going to hurt me?" And I literally had to pull a knife on the guy to get him to back away, because he was just rushing at me. And I, as he left, I thought, how sad is that?
It is. It's terrible. I mean, we're human, right? I mean, and mental illness is real. Okay. But the systems we have in place, some of them seem to be doing very well. Okay. But we farm almost all of it out. Okay. And here's what, this is not
get into this. I want to make sure our listeners know what we're talking about here. We're everybody, we are talking with Mike Carey. He is running for Salt Lake Council at large. He is in a primary that is going to be on June 25th.
And they're actually starting to mail ballots out next week on June 4th.
Yep.
So that really is the start of it.
Yeah, Mike is going through his background, in case you haven't caught it yet, and how his skills are going to be brought to bear on managing the changing relationship between the county council, the cities, and being that layer of government between the state and the cities. So, and I believe we're probably just going to be getting into, there you go.
There he is.
County
Look at that
guy. Yeah. So, but Mike, you were going to get into mental health and your approach. We all know that yep, there you go. If you can, if you're interested in signing up for helping Mike on the ground, because Mike's campaign is definitely grassroots, but also if you can make a donation, I'm sure that Mike would greatly appreciate that.
And Mike, for those,
Yes.
there's many of our viewers that don't actually view, they just listen. Can you give your website information and how they can make a donation?
Sure. It's Mike Carey, MikeCarey, the number 4, cc.com. And then I'm easy to find on social media. If you Google Mike Carey County Council, you'll find it as one of the first hits.
And that's Carey for
yes.
everyone. Yeah.
No
Okay.
relation to Jim Carey, who has 2 R's.
Yes.
No relation to him or his bank account.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
moving on. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed in the past 10 years being here in Salt Lake County is that the number of homeless people seems to be growing. Talking with my friends that live downtown, or my son that lives over by Westminster, I mean, he has problems with people trying to break into his house. His car was stolen, things like that, and it just seems like it's a problem that's growing. And I just never really, when I moved here a long time ago, and Utah was much smaller, I just never imagined that. And I came here from New Jersey too. Mike did not, and I didn't know each other in New Jersey. Just full disclosure, but anyway, I just didn't imagine.
Roy, let's be honest.
What's that?
I'm much younger than you, Roy. Come on now.
Yes, you
Oh
are.
yeah,
that is true.
I came from New Jersey too. I just don't want to be excluded from the.
You just don't brag about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to brag about it. Yeah, but anyway, I was surprised to see Utah in the last 10 years really change as much as it has. And it's getting big city problems. And it seems to be managing those problems with big city solutions, which is to just throw money at it, which to me seems to be like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, the more money you put at it, the more you're accommodating these people, like the people that Steve described. And yet you don't get a solution. You just create a bigger problem because they say, oh, I can come here and actually get free services and they will accommodate me.
Well, and I would add to that all the people they've allowed through the border and how many people it's actually displaced here.
Yeah, that certainly exacerbates the problem. I don't know what the data looks like on that. I mean, I've seen numbers anywhere from 88,000 to 150,000 in Utah in terms of illegals, but I haven't gotten into the weeds of those numbers. What I share what you see as well, Roy. I moved here 13 years ago. The first thing we noticed was how clean the highways are. All right, and now look at them. They're a mess. There's more trash on the side of the road than I saw back east on my last visit. You go downtown. When I was working down in the granary, and even at Fourth East and South Temple for 2 years, there were these roving hordes of tents that get the cops say, pack it up, move to a different part. And it's almost like they just let the pressure build up until people complain enough, and then they just relocate to another part of the city. And there's a number of things going on, all right, that I find disturbing. Okay. First of all, okay, let's talk about the budget aspect. Okay, yes. Do we probably need more money? Yeah, we do. Okay. But we need money in programs that commit people to getting better, not just housing them. We've had this housing first mindset that is a proven failure in so many other cities that have tried this before. Let's put them in tiny homes. Let's subsidize an encampment, tucked away that's not in the neighborhood or next to people that own or rent, and that never works. There's not one example in the United States in the last 25 years where that works. All right. It's one of the most critical failures.
It seems to me that they're almost designed to grow a bureaucracy to basically be able to administer those programs, and the people that are actually administering those programs are getting paid very well.
Well, I mean, look at LA County made the news in the last year. They have like 250 people that work on the homeless problem. They all make over $200,000 a year. Where's the incentive to solve the problem when you work yourself out of a job?
Right.
So I share that sentiment. But when I look at the roving hordes, okay, like there's a budget aspect to this. All right. I would like to see us, get lean and efficient within the county budget and use some of that surplus to actually fund programs that work and programs that we can measure outcomes. Okay. Like, I have a relative that had a substance abuse problem, went through the VA system. It took him 8 or 9 months, I think, to get clean. And then he had to work on himself for years until for another year or two, until he was in a good spot. Okay. I'm not suggesting the county take someone and, rebuild them like the $6 million man, over a 2-year period, but we putting them in shelter or without addressing the root cause of the problem, which is either drugs or alcohol, and exacerbated by most likely some form of mental illness, or vice versa. The mental illness leads to self-medication through drugs and alcohol. Okay. Until you invest the time, and until you have the resources to truly invest the time to get them well, they're not going to get well. It's going to be the recidivism rate is going to be huge. So I would take the headroom from the budget and actually apply it to that to try and actually solve the problem. There's some areas where we can deploy those funds. All right. Another area is, we've got 2 wings of the jail right now that aren't even occupied because we don't have enough people working the jail. Okay. Imagine if we could have full employment at the jail, operate those 2 additional wings, and then the DA, who is soft on crime, can stop using, the police, or stop when they do enforce the law and they do make an arrest. It's a revolving door. The cops I've talked to in the county say they're still filling out paperwork, when the person they brought in is already back out on the street. So
let's talk about the jails for a moment. The county is not paying for obviously the new prison,
mm-hmm.
but I've been canvassing and talking to people, and a couple of them had husbands that worked as guards in one in the prison and one in the county jail facility, and they're saying that the conditions are horrendous there, and that the guards do not feel safe at the county jails
mm-hmm.
or the prison. How have you given that much thought, and how we can address some of those concerns? You mentioned wings that aren't even being used. Is finding people to actually work there a problem?
Yeah, we probably need to pay them more money. Okay, if we're going to attract people to these jobs, you got to pay them a living wage. Okay, now they can make good money right now, but I don't know that there's like a marketing wing out there, a marketing strategy out there right now to try to get more people into those jobs. And those jobs oftentimes don't. I think you got to be 21, but you can get into the system like at 18. That's my understanding. So you can do other jobs for the sheriff's office, but there's a difference between criminals and people who need help. Let's be clear.
So when you talk about people who need help, mental health, like the person that you saw,
he was clearly
the other day,
schizophrenic or something.
Are you advocating that Salt Lake County get into the business of like running drug rehab programs or something? What is your kind of high level solution for this?
Well, don't we already have Salt Lake County mental health? We
do. It's overwhelmed right now, but I think there's more money that needs to be pushed towards that. But I also think we need to revise the strategy around a not long-term care, but let's call it interim-term care, so that we reduce the revolving. We stop the revolving door, right? When you look at all right, let's take a homeless person on the street with a substance abuse problem. Okay, let's start there. First thing you got to do is get them clean and sober. Depending on what they're hooked on, that can take, just to get them sober, could take 2 weeks. Okay, and that's managed by healthcare professionals. Then you've got this next period where there's either combination of group and individual therapy. A lot of these exist in the private insured markets. You have these facilities that people with coverage can actually use, and they can be pricey. But if you have a program that says, first we're going to get you clean and sober, then we're going to get you kind of stabilized, okay, from a mental health perspective. And then we're going to work on reintegrating you and making you successful on the back end. I think there's a lot of opportunity to use the nonprofits, but I think the structure needs to be revisited so that we're actually measuring success, so that if this nonprofit's not achieving success in their portion of the scope, right, let's find others. Okay. And then I think there's probably a need for a facility. Okay. Whether we can utilize, existing facilities and repurpose them, I would want to look at that. Okay. But the root cause of the issue is mental illness and or drugs and alcohol. Right. So we need to, I think if you can attack that root cause and come up with a program that, come up with a program that focuses on making sure the root cause doesn't manifest itself again, I think you're going to have a higher success rate on the back end.
So your idea is a kind of collection of experts that are basically private companies. They could be nonprofit or they could be for profit that help in these different areas. And the county would then have budget to basically put these homeless people who are have mental illness, drug substance abuse problems, and start to put them through this process with a program that follows up and measures success of each step along the way to make sure that we're constantly reevaluating how the program is going and its level of success, and then fix it and adjust it if it's not working.
Correct. And then you would do that by using like a 2 or a 3 year contract. You know what I mean? For each one of those service providers. If they don't hit these KPIs, it's going back out for bid in year 2. You know what I mean?
My wife and I give to the rescue mission that takes a lot of people in off the street. I think one of the requirements is that they come in sober before they're, and so, but I think the model for success there is pretty high. Mm-hmm. What about taking a look at what some of the private programs like that are doing, comparing the success rate against what the county is currently doing, and perhaps model after what they're doing,
or even transition the county program and the employees there into these other private organizations and get them off of, because they're county employees. I think in this situation, correct me if you guys tell me if you think differently, county employees are going to be better managed if they're managed by a private organization that is either for profit or has some economic incentive to do the right thing, rather than going back to the earlier part of the conversation that we had, which was governments don't have any economic incentive as individuals to actually do the right thing and make their job go away.
Yeah, profit motive is probably the not the right label, but an incentive structure. All right, the incentive is, if you're a nonprofit or you're not in the business of making profit, but you're in you still have bills to pay, right? So are you covering your bills and achieving success? You could compete it to a for-profit. Okay, there's a lot of for-profit healthcare out there, and they're very successful business models. Universal Health Services, HCA, I think it's Health Corporation of America. Those are two of the biggest, that I know of. I'm sure there's plenty of others, but and it's not just a de facto like, hey, let's go hire a bunch of for-profit and people make money off mental health. No, it's a renewable contract that has a clear start and a clear finish, all right, and a clear waypoint at which, if the contract can either be extended, provided certain KPIs are being met, or it's a new competition period is automatically triggered if KPIs are not being met. And if it's really bad and the KPIs are they're completely off the mark, you have a termination clause to be able to recompete it at any time.
That makes sense.
And that happens in all other market sectors, and it happens in healthcare. And what I'm talking about, this program I'm describing this is not my idea. Okay. I've seen this in other health systems around the country, including the VA.
Before we get into that, you're listening to KMMU .org. We are broadcast live on YouTube, X, and Rumble.
Formerly known as Twitter. Oh yeah, we're not going to say that.
We're not saying that anymore.
Okay.
Elon told us don't say that.
Okay.
So, but we are opening up the phone lines.
We decided to.
Because Steve and I can't hold a conversation.
Well, no, actually, my phone's been blowing up, Mike.
Yeah.
So I said we'd open up the phone lines. I'm getting texts, messages. Why aren't you guys allowing call in? So I said, go ahead, call in. We'll see if they actually call. So feel free. What's the number?
Call in at 385-899-2134. Please call in, and Dwayne will tee us up. And I think we actually have one in waiting right now, and have a question for Mike. Maybe Mike can get some volunteers for his campaign as well.
That would be an awesome thing. It says that the lonely screener, he's a lonely screener. No one's waiting yet. But those of you that have been texting me, please call into that number.
385-899-2134.
That's the number. And we'd like you to know again that we're with Mike Carey, who is running for the Salt Lake County Council at-large position. This is a big deal, people. The county council members have so much responsibility. It's super important that we get the right people in there. Mike Carey is that person. Both Roy and I know him personally.
And the county has been changing very rapidly. We all see it because many of us live here. Or if you drive through the county, and you see that it is changing rapidly. And as a result, the roles and responsibility of the county council should change with that growth and reflect that growth. And Mike has a plan to actually adapt the county council's roles and responsibility to the changing role and responsibility of the council itself. So, yeah. Mike, coming back to we'll wait for callers to come in, but coming back to your plan, so the mental health would be driven by private or nonprofit people who are under contract. It would be relatively short contract. The performance of those companies would be measurable, would be objective measurements, and that would be evaluated presumably by the county council members, to actually figure out how that was working, and then there would be a decision to either renew the existing contract or to bid it out and try to get in somebody new.
Actually, managers or administrators at the county Department of Health would be the ones that would ultimately determine if the terms of those contracts are being met. So
assuming that they would come to you guys, the county council members, to say, hey, here's the performance of this particular company.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we recommend moving forward, and you guys would play the role of due diligence and figure out whether the contract warranted being renewed.
Yeah, and I know it's oftentimes considered a dirty word or dirty term in Utah, but public-private partnerships. This isn't a public-private partnership. Okay, this is it's not far off from what we're doing now. I'm talking about making some tweaks so that we can actually see improved results. And and how you improve those results is instituting a slightly stronger incentive structure, so that it's not just growing budgets year over year.
Is there an incentive structure for the people that are homeless and living in the park, other than just getting them to move from park to park, or are you anticipating something where the person gets put into this program, and if they just keep bouncing out or they leave, they don't want to stay in there, that there's some sort of jail sentence, or what do you see? How do you see that working?
The goal is to get people to be self-sufficient.
Right.
Okay. That's no matter what. And not everyone's going to fall into that degree of success, or they're going to see varying degrees of success. But the hope is, by addressing the primary root cause for a lot of the homeless we see down in the city, especially on the west side, is, by attacking the addiction problem. Okay. I think by default, it's just logical. You're going to have a higher degree of success. Okay. For the people that fall out of that, I'm not big on jailing people with mental illness. Okay. Because I don't think it solves any problems. All right. And now they're basically becoming a ward of the state. And and I don't know enough, frankly, about the state systems. I'm sure we have them where they could provide, I'm sure there's other programs outside the county that could actually provide longer term care. But we're not putting them on a bus and sending them to Denver. Okay. That's inhumane. But we do have to just approach the overall problem as, from a standpoint of what is success, what does it look like, and how are we achieving that success, and then measuring that on a regular interim basis. All right.
And you said that this wasn't your idea, or the overall structure wasn't your idea. Can you give examples where or some things that are similar?
Well, there were programs back in the 80s and 90s that did similar things back east. When I was growing up there, my own personal experience with family members that have suffered from addiction, went through programs, one especially in the VA. The VA has long-term programs that, could take anywhere from, depending on the individual, 8 to 16 months to get back out into the world and be self-sufficient. But it's really hard to put a timetable or say, you've got 8 days to get sober. A hardened alcoholic needs more than 8 days to get sober, and it needs to be managed by a healthcare professional, because they can die if they just go cold turkey from booze.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit of healthcare. It's a lot of mental health counseling, but then there's also social workers that are involved to almost like a managed care. Think of it like a project, right? You're taking a person that is destitute and falling on really hard times, and you're going to rebuild them over time, a little at a time, not all at once. It's swallowing the elephant whole. But you start with the most critical part first, which is sobriety. And then you work on building them up to the point where they can walk out the door. And, there might be some long-term social work involved that either the state or the county provides. But again, by building that headroom, by not spending on all these things that are not part of the county's core business, we can, I'm not talking about raising taxes to do this. I'm talking about finding cutting some of the stuff in the county budget right now that we've kind of gone, off venturing into that really aren't part of the county's core business. And this should get a lot easier, frankly, as the last of these remaining unincorporated areas get absorbed by surrounding cities. The other thing too is development, right? I want to pivot, if we could, to talk about development. I've had a kind of a ringside seat to the massive growth we've seen. The first question I always ask is, why do we have all this growth? Okay. Why are we constantly why is it preordained that, well, we're growing? Okay. Our natural birth rate is the highest in the United States, but we've been importing a lot of companies and importing a lot of higher paying white collar jobs. The average wage in Salt Lake County is $65,700 a year the last time I checked. Okay. So when you're bringing in someone from California in a tech job who's making, 130 or more, all right, from the Bay Area, especially, they're not taking a pay cut to move. They're going to have an enhanced quality of life because their dollar is going to go a lot further, and so we've seen this massive increase. I think a big part of the growth that we see, or the increase in property values and real estate sales over the last 10 years has been a function of us bringing in a lot of these companies, that not all the jobs go to Utahns. Okay. We're not pumping out 10,000 computer scientists a year from the university system. Okay. But there were some years in the teens, and even as recently as 2 years ago, where we brought in something like 22,000 jobs, and like more than half of them were tech jobs. Okay. I'm not anti-tech, but we've got to have a balanced approach to our economic development policy. And one of my plans is to, I did a career combine. You can see it on my website, actually, and on my social media. Yesterday we called it a career combine, but we went to West High School, worked with the football team, helped them set it up. I called a bunch of buddies in the business from construction, trades, and general contracting. And they met with a bunch of high school kids. And these kids, unless you go to one of the technical programs, okay, these kids aren't really aware of all these opportunities. Fire, EMS was there as well, and police. And they got to see firsthand the opportunities that await them after graduation. And they can plan for that starting their junior year of high school. Okay. The focus.
It's not a university or college track. It's,
exactly.
It's a trade school and then into a job.
Yeah. It's a career.
An internship could be.
Yeah. It can be an intern. A lot of them offer internships while they're in high school, part-time. But the goal is when I talk about affordable housing, I actually switch it around and I say housing affordability. How do you get housing affordability? Well, a 23-year-old plumber in Salt Lake County who just finished a 5-year apprenticeship is making $80,000 to $100,000 a year right now with no student loan debt. Okay. A couple of years of that, by your mid-20s, you're able to buy your first home. Now it might not be, a 3,200 square foot, five bedroom, place up on the bench, 15 minutes from a snowbird, but you can, that's actually a starting point. And that I would like to see us pivot our economic development policy to be a little more balanced around manufacturing, the service industry. We have seen some of that over the last 2 years. Tech has actually kind of lost a lot of jobs in the last 2 years. No one talks about that. We have a lot of manufacturing up around Hill Air Force Base with all the government contracts up there. We have a ton of manufacturing on the west side. I'd like to see us do that, because those are careers that pay living wages, outside of retail and food service, which is not meant to be a career.
And make no mistake, I've been a general contractor for most of my life. These are good, honorable jobs, and right now you have a hard time finding electricians, plumbers, HVAC guys, and that also contributes to the high cost of housing. Is because
there's a couple hundred
service providers,
but
there's a couple hundred open electrician apprenticeships right now just in Salt Lake County. Okay, and these are jobs paying more than $20 an hour. They pay for your education. There's a huge opportunity out there. The average age of an electrician in the state of Utah right now is 55 years old. Okay. I don't know what that means for our power grid in 10 years, but it's not good. We've got to start replenishing the inventory of skilled talent, okay, to replace a population that's aging out.
I'm in absolute 100% agreement with you, Mike, especially being from that industry myself. We're going to shift gears a little bit right now. We actually do have a caller. We have Fred Hayes on the line. Fred, how are you doing today? Hello, Fred. Can you hear us?
Hi. Thanks for taking my call, Mike. I'm really worried about the elections system. In fact, when hopefully you get elected, I will call you an acting commissioner, because there's absolutely no assurance that you were validly elected, because no vote counting was witnessed by humans. And in your role as on the county council, I'm wondering what ideas you could bring to the table to try and correct this fundamental problem that we've got. Sorry, I'm irrigating.
No, you're good. You're good, Fred. I haven't been into the weeds nearly as much as Roy and Steve have, but they've educated me certainly a lot on some of the problems we have. I think we've got to cleaning up the voter rolls has got to become priority one for us at the at the clerk's office. I know of the system, Eric. I don't know all of the purported deficiencies associated with it. I'm sure Steve and Roy can wax poetic about that. But I think first and foremost, we've got to have fair elections, and that starts, right at the ground, at the very basic fundamental is cleaning up the voter rolls. I send out an email, every couple days to all the to the membership roll from the party, and I can't tell you how many people have responded saying, "I live in Europe, I live in Iowa, I live in Ohio, I live in Florida, but I'd vote for you if I could." And I'm like asking myself, is there going to be a ballot delivered to their old address? So because if the party thinks they're still here, I'm curious what the clerk's rolls, voter rolls are showing. And so I think we have to start with cleaning up the rolls. And frankly, I would really like to see the state take the lead to moving back to in-person election day. I would like to personally see election day made a federal holiday, so there's no excuse. Okay. To go to the polls and cast your ballot on the day of. But I do not I'm not a fan of election month. I think that there's too many points where data can be corrupted, or where there's this ability to ballot harvest, or you can have multiple ballots showing up to the same address. We know that's happened. There's proof of that. How consequential that is to the final vote count, I don't know. But the one of the first things I would like to see us do is just, the clerk, I've met people at the clerk's office, and I think you guys have too, Roy and Steve, and they think they're doing a great job, and by all accounts, they probably are, but they're doing the best they can with the data they have. And so how reliable is the data? I'd like to see us go back to a Secretary of State, so it's not the Lieutenant Governor's office that is overseeing their own election potentially, like we're seeing right now. But from a county clerk perspective, they're going to follow the laws that the state passes. So enabling them to do it as well as they possibly can is, I think, what the council can actually influence in terms of how they're structured. The county clerk's office is no different, in my opinion, than the sheriff's office or the Department of Health in terms of measuring success. One KPI I would look at for the clerk's office is how clean are your voter rolls? And if they say, oh, well, we have 5 to 7% that we're still cleaning up, that's way too high. All right. It should be far less than 0.5%, in my opinion.
What I think you'll see when first of all, Salt Lake County is in charge of its own elections within the county. And you, as a county council member, you're on the board of canvassers. You will actually certify the election. And so what Steve and I have seen, not just in Salt Lake County, but we've traveled all over the state and talked to county council members and county clerks, is they don't really know what they don't know. So,
yeah.
and what I mean by that is, you as a board of canvass member are going to be asked to certify an election, and that will be based upon a report that was written by the county clerk who actually conducted the election. And you're not going to have access, in our view, to the data behind that report to actually do reasonable due diligence. And you're not going to have the expertise to do that either. I mean, you're a smart guy and you've got a lot of work experience, but you don't have the experience in this specific area. And so to us, that seems to be the biggest impediment to getting elections that somebody like Fred, or quite honestly us here, would ultimately see as being a good election. It's really making sure that there's transparency and accountability, going back to what you were saying before, and real expert due diligence done on those elections, and not just simply a trust me.
No, I'm with you there, Roy. And the way I see it is, when I'm elected in the fall, I would take office in January, and then we'd have basically 18 to 20 months to really get it cleaned up. All right, before the next election cycle begins.
Agreed. And I think ultimately, Steve and I weren't of this mindset before. I believe that I know that Fred was that way, because Steve and I have met Fred before, and worked with Fred on election integrity issues. But running an election where you have mail-in ballots and you're processing mail-in ballots in mass and so on is a very, very, very technically challenging problem to be run by a county clerk who they have many, many, many other jobs. And the easiest way to control a lot of these variables is in person, day of, cast your ballot with ID.
Yes.
Voter rolls are in hard copy, not electronic voter rolls, and then hand counted. And I know it sounds like, wow, that's what dinosaurs used to do, but man, it certainly does.
Countries in Europe still do that.
Well, actually, France does that.
They went back to it.
They went back to that because they realized that they could not control all the variables like you were indicating a moment ago. There's too many variables.
Chain of custody with all the mail-in ballots.
It introduces so many points of potential failure. There's no way anyone can say, if you're talking about one ballot, okay, I'm going to mail one ballot to this address. They're going to fill it out and send it back. Low probability there's going to be anything wrong with that. Might get lost in the mail. But when you do that across, there's 500,000 plus registered voters in the county, you're gone. That the statistical probability alone is greater than zero. And I think that's, we should be constantly driving, after every election to get as close to zero as humanly possible.
And the other thing that you'll find is that the county controls its voter rolls, but so does the state. So Salt Lake County controls its voter rolls for Salt Lake residents, but then so does Utah County. Salt Lake County doesn't do anything with Utah County and vice versa, but everything rolls up to the state. And then you have Eric on top of that. And so you have multiple fingers in the pie, in the voter registration pie. And that's
which by the way, happens to be based out of New Jersey also, Eric. Electronic Registration Information Center.
So are you sure you don't work for Eric? But
yeah.
Anyway, this is a much longer discussion, and we're hoping that you get in, because we have had conversations with a number of the city council members.
Almost all of the current ones.
And some of them tell us to go pound sand. They give us the Heisman, get out.
Yep.
But most of them are receptive to the meeting. And what we have found is a shocking level of lack of understanding of how the system works. And
shocking is an understatement, by the way.
And they're the ones that are supposed to actually, quote, certify. So if you don't understand the basic fundamentals of the system, how in the world can you actually certify something that has been done accurately? And I don't fault them. I mean, you guys are getting elected. It's a part-time job. You have your work experiences in private industry or whatever. You're bringing that to the table. And not everybody's an IT person or an expert. And I know from both of our experiences, when we first started digging into this, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was shocked. I thought it was super easy. Like, how hard could it be to count a ballot? Well, it turns out it is really freaking hard,
No, I like I said, I think, I think there's an opportunity to, listen to folks such as yourself at the county level, Okay. Take that feedback and go require the clerk's office to, with the auditor, maybe the state auditor helps out, at the state level, but in concert, the two of them, because, after this election, we will have downtime, and that's the only time you have to fix it. You don't want to be, changing the tire while you're going 100 miles an hour down the road in the 2026 election. We need to do this, and it needs to start, February of 2025. And there needs to be a time frame laid out when we're going to have certain metrics. How do we scrub the voter rolls? Yes, you're going to use data for some of that, but also, in my business, anytime you've complete a major task or a major operation, we do something called a plus delta. What went well and what do we need to improve? Okay. And it might be different. If you tried it 10 times, you might have 10 different plus delta lists on each one. But, it's just it's a mindset that never assume that everything's operating 100% correct efficiency. Okay. You have to always kind of have a little bit of scrutiny, a scrutinizing eye, and you need to have a little bit of cynicism. I joke often, I'm like, Utah optimism plus New Jersey cynicism gives us pragmatism. Like that's how, because you got it. You can't just assume goodwill or good intentions are good enough, result in proper outcomes or correct outcomes.
I think
with any system of that complexity.
Going back to our earlier discussion about budget and how to trim the budget efficiently, and smartly, intelligently. If we were to go back to paper ballots, there would be, there will be more inconvenience for people, because it's pretty convenient to just like check the boxes and drop it in there and send it off. People would have to go to a voting center, etc. But I think you'll see that you can actually reduce your overall cost of running the election. I mean, that was one of the things that we always heard is the solutions that we initially proposed. They said, well, who's going to pay for that? Well, I'm not going to pay for that. It's like, okay. Anyway.
Well, I go back to the first time I voted. I think I was 19. You went down to the school. It was at the middle schools. It was at the high schools. You had a bunch of election volunteers. They ran, you had, I don't know what the correct terminology is, but you had like the precinct chair would be, or the precinct chairs and vice chairs would help run the election. They would all be trained. They'd have to use a volunteer system. That's that's the beauty of our democracy, right? Or our republic. But New Jersey, my county had as many people as the entire state of Utah when I was a kid. Okay. And we did it. It was one day. You had to request an absentee ballot. And the only people we knew who did that were like friends of mine that had older siblings in the military, or someone's, grandparents are laid up in a nursing home and they can't actually get to the ballot box. Even when I moved here in 2010 election, I was in Maryland and it was at our middle school. You just have to know where you have to go, and if the voter rolls are cleaned up, you can do a mailer that says, hey, on election day, you're going here, boom,
So coming back to economic development,
Yeah.
You talked about how skewed it was towards high-tech industries in general and manufacturing. Who's actually driving that?
Well, Steve, your opponent in the primary is actually I think executive director of EDC Utah. He's only
What does EDC stand for?
Economic Development Corporation for Utah.
Okay.
Utah. So EDC Utah, Economic Development Corporation of Utah. It's basically the state sets up a nonprofit to basically do business development on behalf of the state to try to attract companies and grow local companies. Okay. EDC Utah basically gets their policy direction from the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, GOEO. Okay. GOEO, which again reports to the governor's office, essentially gets their policy positions from either through legislation that's passed by the House and and put into law by, pass the House, pass the Senate, put into law by, by the governor's signature. But they also get a lot of their policy positions from the Salt Lake Chamber, which is the largest industry association in Utah. It's not just Salt Lake County. It's pretty much the entire state. And there's companies in adjoining states that are part of the Salt Lake Chamber that have business here in Utah as well. And their board of directors is like 65 to maybe 90 people long, but it's a who's who of big business in the state of Utah. So, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Okay. But EDC Utah, by, Scott's predecessor and even since he's taken it over,
That's Scott Cuthbertson, right?
Scott Cuthbertson, they're ultimately working for the governor. Okay. So if Governor Cox is up there celebrating all these big tech wins, I'm over here sitting, as a construction guy saying, you're screwing over the middle class because you're just you're hyperinflating the value of their home. Those assessments the taxable assessment will inevitably go up as well as a result of market conditions. Maybe not what the fair market value is, if you were to do actual real estate, actually list the home. But, the property taxes inevitably follow. I know we have truth in taxation laws and stuff like that, but, so there's this system, this very large, complicated system that says the more high-paying jobs we attract to Utah that are not organically grown within Utah, okay, means that the demand and on real estate, existing inventory is going to go high, and the people that we're bringing in, because Utah used to be a very economical place to live, are most likely going to be making well above the county average of $65,700 a year. So their ability to pay a higher rate, especially when mortgage rates were down at 2.75%, 3%, their ability, that's how you got into these bidding wars. I think that was a tactical error on the part of the Herbert administration in the first 3.5 years of the Cox administration, who got so excited by the short-term win of being able to cheer on, look at all these new jobs I'm bringing to Utah, without considering the long-term consequences that it has on the middle class and the people that are already here.
Well, isn't it also the case? I mean, one, if you're pushing everything towards high tech, you're skewing the entire economy in that direction. And to the extent that the high tech industry gets a hiccup, you don't have a diversified business environment, and therefore you're more likely, when a downturn does come, it's going to be more severe. That's part one. But then part two, you mentioned it earlier. It seems to me that, if kids that are growing up here aren't going to become computer scientists or, computer engineers of some sort, and we're basically creating industries where they have to move out of state in order to live, or they have to move into these other trades, which isn't a bad thing. But it's probably, if you could actually grow. I mean, when I first moved here, a lot of the industry in Utah, like west of I-15, was in mining.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of mining engineering companies here that were working not only in Nevada, but also up in Idaho and in Utah and in other places around the world, providing mining services and equipment.
Well, like you said, it's essentially hyperinflating the economy, where you bring tens of thousands of workers in from northern and southern California to work these high-tech jobs, and they can afford to pay millions of dollars for a home.
Well, and you're seeing that collapse. There's kind of a slow collapse happening in the commercial real estate market. Multifamily is seeing reduced rents from their peak a year and a half ago. Some have dropped them almost 30%. You're seeing, rents that were previously $1,500-$1,600 a month being offered at $1,100-$1,200 a month plus 2 months free rent. So, this notion that multifamily is somehow the solution is kind of run its course. Okay. We went all in on that to try to solve the housing affordability problem. But now you have the governor talking about basically taking control over the autonomy of cities to determine their own zoning code by jamming this, what is it called? It's the Utah First Homes program. He's been touting since like the Monday after convention when he lost, where he basically said
where he got smoked.
Yeah, where he got smoked 2-1. He's basically saying that I think he was, maybe not verbatim, not direct quote, but it was something along the lines of the cities and counties better get on board or we're going to make them. Like, I've been here long enough to know that, the land dispute, the running land dispute between the federal government controlling Utah land is, pretty cantankerous. And now we've got our own governor talking about doing it to the cities and towns.
Yeah,
Like,
and government
what am I
has
missing
no
here?
place. Government has no place in that kind of.
Well, Mike and I are from New Jersey, and when you're from New Jersey, you know what's going on not only in New Jersey but also in the boroughs of New York and in Lower Westchester County and so on. And whenever I've seen, anyway, the governments, whether it's a municipal government or state government, get involved in creating low-income housing, affordable housing, it always ends up being a disaster. And then when they do rent control, like, because I lived in Manhattan for a little bit anyway, rent control in Manhattan is a complete disaster. It gets gamed. And you're actually seeing that in Buenos Aires, of all places, and the new president of Argentina has completely torn up that system. And all of a sudden, housing stock has increased because, when it was controlled by the government, people were gaming the system and taking their real estate off the market. So, Cox tried to enforce or push down those types of things on Salt Lake County, on Utah County, and on municipalities. That is going to be a disaster. It's never worked anywhere in the world that I know of.
And frankly, on the county council, I'll be the first person to make sure that the House delegates that we elect and that represent us on Capitol Hill are not going to be so quick to jump on the bandwagon for more of these special carve-outs like the Fair Park and programs like that drive up taxes on the call it the native population.
Are you talking about me and House District 41?
Yes.
For sure.
But we've got to stop getting so excited as elected leaders by every shiny object. Okay. It's we've got to do a better job of thinking about the long-term consequences. I guarantee it. Mark my words that when that baseball stadium opens, you're going to see a complete regentrification of Rose Park. Okay. Because people who live on fixed incomes are going to see their assessed property values climb through the roof over 10 years that follow. The infrastructure that usually is needed to support big programs like that lags typically by 10 to 20 years. Okay, we're seeing it right now in the southwest quadrant of the valley where there's been massive infill development and greenfield development, and a lot of it is multifamily. And the solution, from a mass transit or a light rail standpoint, is going to be in the billions of dollars. Okay, and so why aren't we? I don't understand, for the life of me, I cannot understand why those questions don't get asked on the front end. I have an idea. I mean, the developers in this state are pretty notorious for controlling a large portion of the legislature. And they're also one of the biggest donors to the Cox campaign. Last time I checked, it was up to $600,000 of the $3.2 million he's raised.
I might add the Cuthbertson campaign as well. No surprise.
Of course. That doesn't make me anti-growth. That doesn't make me anti-business. That doesn't make me anti-developer. I mean, that's the community I work in.
No, but I tell you what,
you can't do it at the expense of middle-class families that, are getting a double whammy with with inflation from Bidenomics,
I have a problem every single time that any elected official, whether real estate developer or not, enriches themselves off the back of the taxpayer. And we're seeing that kind of thing time and time again. The gondola is a perfect example
Yep.
of that. We did a podcast here a couple months ago specifically about the gondola. We had the town of Alta. We had a university group, I forget their name, Emily Perch. And then we had the Friends of the Canyon people here. And we found out, lo and behold, who bought up all the land at the base of the canyon where the gondola is going to go. It is our state legislators, several of them, and Sandy County Council people. And that's why they're pushing the narrative where 90% of the people don't want the gondola, and yet our elected officials are pushing for it for one simple reason, and that is because they're going to enrich themselves.
Well, and as I understand it, well, first of all, I think the last estimate done on the gondola is a couple of years old, so you can take that number and throw it in the trash. Number one. Number two, I've actually done public-private partnerships. These are 30-year contracts with a long-term concession where it's design, build, finance, operate, maintain. I've done them in Canada for one of my previous employers. Those are contracts with strict KPIs that get measured either on a monthly or a quarterly basis. Okay. And oh, by the way, the private sector to public sector money is usually like minimum 8-1. All right. As I understand the gondola, it's like reversed, for every dollar the private sector kicks in, the taxpayer is going to be on the hook for the 7 or 8.
To my knowledge, Mike, they're not kicking in any.
Yeah,
What's happened here is the state legislators and other elected officials purchased the land and then pushed the narrative that we had to have this as the preferred mode of transportation of that canyon.
And the development of the gondola is supposed to be managed by UDOT. Going to the early part of this conversation, you know how hard it is to do the front end engineering and design, and then making sure you've been through that in all these different levels so that when you actually go to build and let the contract, that you're going to actually hit the budget within a couple percent.
Especially in the last
have
4
not
years.
done that at all. So anyway, they've not done that at all, and it's going to be. I believe that what I've heard about the prison, moving it from the point of the mountain out towards Grantsville, is that particular project is like 5 or 6 times over budget, and they're actually cutting the overall scope of the project so it doesn't climb further. And it's been a total freaking disaster. And because they're going to the early part of your conversation, there are no consequences to the people who are the politicians who are approving these. They can always go back to the taxpayer and say, oops, we've had a cost overrun, yours.
When does it ever come in under budget, Mike? Isn't it always over budget with a government entity?
Well, anything. Well, there's definitely we call it the PETA factor, pain in the ass factor, when it comes to government work. The reality is that any number that predates 2022, you can add 40% to it minimum because of wage growth and the cost of construction materials that have skyrocketed due to inflation. We saw that in every market sector across the board. When multifamily was booming 3 years ago, it was in wood. Okay. Now we've seen labor in some trades increase 20, 30, 40% over 2021 rates. So, again, I'm real curious as to how informed that budget is, or any budget can be at this point, because the government agencies they never move really fast. Okay. A budget is always a budget is old the day after it's printed. Okay.
Well, and they also like UDOT in this particular situation, I think they have an economic incentive, a personal economic incentive to sandbag the budget.
Yeah, totally.
They can always, once they start the project, they go, well, they can get it approved and say, well, it didn't, it doesn't cost that much. Then they get it approved and they go, oops. And then they go back to the taxpayer and soak the taxpayer.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we've come up on the 6 o'clock hour, and we do have a program that follows us here
Yep.
in just a few minutes. We got a couple minutes. Mike, is there anything that you'd like to say to the audience, just kind of imparting today?
Yeah, I want to address one quick thing. There's this notion that I can't win in November because I can't fundraise. Okay. I've done fine on fundraising. I've got signs up. I've got digital advertising. I've got print advertising. I've done everything that you need to do. In a primary campaign, a countywide primary campaign. What I don't have is the backing of the institutional donor class, like we've talked about, that kind of really holds a lot of our politicians, under their thumb. And my intention on winning the November race is the people of Utah need to understand that Salt Lake County is kind of like the red line. Okay. We cannot, if we don't start treating Salt Lake County strong Republican candidates in Salt Lake County races as statewide races, it's only a matter of time before we become a Colorado or an Oregon, where the center of power calls the shots for the rest of the state. I saw it in Maryland when I lived there. We've seen it happen in, at least 10 other states in the last 20 years, where the very blue dot gets just big enough to be able to control the narrative in the direction of the entire state. So if conservatives in Utah want to keep Utah red, okay, in the long term, they need to be looking at these races. They need to first elect a true conservative in the primary, which is me. Okay. And then we need to rally around this race when it comes to November, because we know we're going to most likely win the Senate, the congressional districts, the governor's race after we get through the June primary, regardless of who the nominee is. Like, those are kind of a slam dunk. So please go to my website. You can see all my events. I'm also one of the most accessible candidates out there. I have a few town halls remaining at the county libraries. Come in. We can have they're usually a conversation just like this. 15 minutes of me educating folks on my background, why I chose to run, what I plan to do. And then the rest of the hour, the remaining hour and 15 minutes is usually just talking about the issues that people care about. So go to my website, www.mikecarey4cc.com. Look at my events. Come. They're open to everybody. And, or you can email me or call, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody in the county.
Well, Mike, we really want to thank you for coming on our show today. I think it was very informative. I know it was to me, Roy.
Yes, I learned something.
I learned a thing or two, and we encourage everyone to do their due diligence. It's not a matter of just looking to see who you recognize and eeny, meeny, miny, mo. We really need to get into the details about who we're electing. And that goes for not only Mike's race, but for every race that's coming up.
Senate District 15,
Senate
House
District 15,
41.
House District 41, among many others. So we want to thank Mike Carey again. He's running for Salt Lake County Council at Large seat, and encourage you to get to know him via his website that he's given out, and to try to attend some of his events. We want to thank everybody for joining us today. We do have, what do they call that show out of Tooele coming up?
Happy hour.
Happy hour with Jared coming up at 6:30. So stay tuned for that.
It's always happy hour in Tooele.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. It's been a pleasure, and I appreciate you.
And stay. Oh, Jared and Holly is happy hour. Mike, stay on. We're going to end this. And then we'll wrap up after that. So
great.
Let's cut the stream.
Okay, everyone.
Hopefully we'll see people soon.
Ta-ta, probably next week.
Yep.
Bye-bye.